Good afternoon from Sydney, Australia. My name is Dr. Robert Beck, and I am going to attempt to make this video very quickly. Unfortunately, my time here in Sydney is very, very limited, and the amenities of where I'm staying, I don't have a table over knee level. Hence why I'm outside on the balcony, so we will get this done as quickly as possible and hopefully adequately. We're going to look at two major questions, and that's the strength of Heidi Rosen's network across the different stages of her career, and using the concept discussed in the readings and video in Module 5, the extent to which those concepts applied to her and how they influenced her power, influence, and networking success. So I think that it's prudent to start with the book of Give and Take by Grant. You know, the video on the LinkedIn article and the video by Grant really did not add a lot of extra value, and so I'm not going to focus on those at all. I'm mostly going to focus on the book itself. And when I took my own assessment of the Grant Give and Take assessment, I found that myself, I am a 40% giver, a 40% matcher, and a 20% taker. And I feel this combination is very similar to Ms. Rosen. You would be hard-pressed to prove that she was a pure giver while she was a very giving person throughout her career, and that led to a lot of her success. You have to understand that there have to be some matching moments in there for her to really soar. At one point in my life, I was what could be considered a pure taker, a pure giver, but all that served was to get me to be what Grant describes as the doormat concept. People used and took, but they never really paid it forward or paid it back in any sort of way. And so in the end, I was kind of still left on the bottom of the heap. Miss Rosen did use her abilities as a giver to help others, but she always made sure that it was benefiting someone, if not herself, then one of her own colleagues at the same time. Very smart business move, in my opinion. At times, it's important to leverage those relationships as a matcher and not just a giver, and I feel that Heidi Rosen really did do this expertly. Ironically, while Grant describes being a giver and how that this leads to pure success more than that of a matcher or a taker, Grant himself is probably not only a giver, he's a matcher. I mean, anybody who would publish a book obviously is looking for some compensation as sales royalties or publishing royalties, and he's getting that every time that he gives his advice, and we're willing to pay that, and that's an okay thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Those that are willing to take the advice or willing to get the advice and tap into his expertise are willing to match that with a dollar amount. And Heidi Rosen did such things with her own career in matching when she would later talk to the same people looking for some sort of payback or reciprocation. So when we look at Cialdini's 2001 article, Harnessing the Science of Persuasion, he goes through about 6 different areas, and I'll quickly run through those as far as it relates to Miss Rosen herself. Liking, and she was genuine in her encounter. She would provide these parties so that she could socially network and still kind of manage her family and balance her work life. And this worked immensely in her favor. Reciprocity. She was a giver, but in the definition of the word means she needed elements of being a matcher, and we discussed that before, but she utilized this quality very, very well. Peer power, she did remain cognizant of her peers throughout her career, their opinions, their desires, their needs, and while she may not have been influenced merely what other opinions were, it definitely played a part, at least somewhat, to influence her career as she moved up the ladder. Consistency, she was a very consistent person, and she was sure not to overtap her resources. She wanted to make sure that she didn't go to the same well too many times and overextend her welcome, if it were, and be viewed as a taker. But at the same time, When she was a venture capitalist, she made it clear to those that she considered friends that they would get no more preferential treatment than others would, and she was very consistent in her clarity. Authority, and she made it known to others, obviously, through her expertise and her experience, that she was an authority that could tap into these valuable networks for many, many other resources in the tech environment. However, this kind of played to her on a negative basis when she went into venture capitalism. We'll talk about that here in a moment when we talk about networks. Scarcity. She was able to tap those resources that others could not, and purely from her network for business associates and friends. However, she did remain clear that she would only tap those resources if both parties could benefit from it, a match or quality, I might add. So when we look at networking, the Uzi and Dunlap article in 2005 on how to build your network, she shared activities such as those parties and was a giver in those parties, and she met with those potential brokers on terms that allowed her to leverage those relationships in the future as those relationships were forged. The parties were genuine in nature, did not seem to be any kind of a schmoozing nature, but there was an element of networking at those parties. She definitely was not a taker in these events, but she would not necessarily be a pure giver. She used those connections that were in positions of authority, not necessarily an authority over her, but authoritative positions that could be used to her benefit at other times. And she did not forge diverse connections, which limited herself when she went into venture capitalism. That is where I felt like her major shortcoming was in her later career. She did wonderful, obviously, but that is all the time I have for you today. I hope this was well